Born to the Goldbottoms, a wealthy dwarf family of sanitation workers, Ragnar Goldbottom Jr. was an arcanist from Dandelier, sets out to discover his purpose in life. With the blessing of his parents, he sets out in hopes of finding new friends and adventure. Ragnar Goldbottom Jr. is the eve of his cousins. Being born with sorcery, his upbringing was undertaken by his mother, an adept mage herself. Unlike his cousins, he didn't participate in the family business of sanitation for the royal family. Instead, he spent most of his time being educated and sent to private school to study and hone his skills and gift with magic. This would leave him alienated by most of his relatives, especially during the holidays. However, when Ragnar saw the opportunity, he decided to set out on his own and discover what lies beyond the books and the teachings of his mother, and what the world has to offer beyond sanitation. Xavian Illamora was born by the harsh climates of the cunning wastes in the town of Gramora. From a young age, Xavian was bigger than most kids his age, which came from his tiefling blood. His father, a tiefling bodyguard, trained Xavian to fight from a very young age, while his mother, an elf sorceress, educated him to the best of her abilities due to her unfortunate amnesia. By the time Xavian was 11, he would learn the full destructive force of his father's blood. A group of kids decided to play a prank on Xavian, unleashing his rage for the first time. Unable to control his anger, he ended up crippling one of the children. She survived, and with the help of his father, Xavian decided that he was going to focus his anger and use it to protect people instead of causing harm. Since then, he took an oath to braving the desert and hunting with his father. And when he was home, he took responsibility for his actions and cared for the little girl that he had crippled. One day, though, coming back from his hunt, Xavian and a few hunters found their village in ruins. A group of bandits stormed the village, kidnapping several people, including Xavian's friend. And all they could find was a strange S mark on the bandits that were killed in the fight. Not being able to live with what happened while he was out, he geared himself up and set out to hunt down and bring home each and every person. Born into the former royal family of Elendor, Eight was a carefree druid who dedicated her life and studies within her circle to be next in line for the Elven throne, before the monarchy was promptly replaced by the Elven Council. With this sudden change, Eight slowly began to realize that something was wrong with the state of her homeland. Nobles who supported her family's rule slowly began to disappear or die unexpectedly. Consulting in her fiancé, Eight slowly grew paranoid of her surroundings and the people who worked for her. One day, her life was shattered and changed forever. After overhearing some guards talking about some invasion on a noble home, Eight quickly ran to find her lover and ask him about this news, only to find him dead in the same room as her brother, Seville Eris. Being a master of words and a noble of high charisma, he managed to convince the council that it was Eight that killed her fiancé instead, and she was promptly exiled, much to her brother's dismay, whom requested her execution. Eight, now always with an eye behind her head, wanders the plain, seeking answers to her fiancé's murder and her framing by her brother. Alistair is a man who chose the life of a wanderer. Left on the streets of Myra when he was a child and raised by other children, Alistair learned that he needed to grow up very quickly. Focused on surviving and keeping each other alive, he never sought out his parents, claiming if they ever cared at all, They wouldn't have left me to die in a box on the street. He found solitude, learning woodland survival, and showed great talent with a bow and arrow. When he was old enough, he set out from Myra to explore and see the world. Soon, registering himself for the Adventurers Guild, he took odd jobs and escort missions to pay for inns and food on a day-to-day basis. One day, he took a job escorting a young couple and their daughter to Steph's when his carriage was attacked by bandits. He fought as hard as he could, but it was not enough to save the parents of this child. Filled with guilt and the need to take responsibility for his mishap, he took the child in and named her Meadow, a name after the place where her parents were buried. He cared for her and raised her just like his own daughter, teaching her the ways of the woods and how to hunt. The past is a way to catch up with people, though. One day, Alistair went out to resupply for the pair's next trip, but on his return, found his place of residence engulfed in flames, with Meadow still inside. Fighting his way through the flames and debris, grabbed whatever he could, found Meadow, and leapt from the second-story window. Through the pain of a broken leg and the burns of the fire, the last thing that he saw that night was a figure draped in shadow approaching them, and then blackness. Alistair woke up several days later in a hospital and learned that he had nearly died from his injuries. When asking about Meadow, the cleric was reluctant to tell him that there was no one else with him when he was found. Now, with a new purpose, he wanders the world in hopes that he can find a clue as to where he can find his beloved stepdaughter. Aristella was born into the noble family of the Ravensgrace. The Ravensgrace family had a long history of being honorable and loyal to the royal family of Elendor. Being the only girl amongst her siblings, Aristella Ravensgrace was a great joy to her family, as her parents and her older brothers doted upon her and spoiled her silly. Her mother Marie was a loving and kind woman. Her father, while stern due to his nobility, was gentle to her and her brothers. The Ravensgrace family enjoyed peace and happiness for many years, but unfortunately, peace does not last. One cold and particularly snowy evening in winter, just after Stella had turned 12 years old, her mother rushed into her room with one of the family's maids who was around her age and quickly began swapping clothes with her. Confused and scared of her mother's panic, she asked many times what was happening, but her mother wouldn't answer as she helped her change clothes, grabbed her hand, and made a rush for one of the hidden escape routes within the manor. Aristella immediately felt fearful as suddenly a scream of a man echoed throughout the halls somewhere within the house. Her mother's face turned pale as she turned to Aristella and says, "Follow the path, Stella. You, at least, must survive." But before Aristella can answer, her mother shoved her through the entrance and closed it tight. Confused beyond belief, Aristella cried and hit her small fists on the closed door for several minutes before wiping her face and made her way through the passageway. After some time, she finally made her way outside. As the cold began to bite at her neck, she was suddenly startled by a group of unfamiliar soldiers spotted her and began to chase her. The soldiers chased Aristella through the snow and the forest that surrounded her home until she hit her limit and became cornered on a small cliff. As the soldiers came closer, and seeing that she had nowhere else to run, she jumped. Aristella eventually woke up in the back of a merchant cart. The couple who had rescued her found her half buried in the snow, and she nearly broke as she learned the fate of her beloved family. The couple, Sasha and Baraka, kindly accepted Aristella and asked her if she would like to stay with them. Having nowhere else to go and no one to turn to, she gladly accepted and was welcomed into their family as if she was their own. Shortly after turning 20, Aristella decided that it was time to strike it out on her own. Wanting to know more about the reasons and events leading up to her family's demise, she parted ways with her adoptive parents in the city of Elendor, where there she began her journey. Born of a group of scientists to create perfect beings, Silky, along with her six older sisters, lived a life of captivity. Each having their own traits, Silky was supposed to be having hair that grew fast and was stronger than spider silk. Instead, she was given the deformation of a second ear within her left one that rings with a constant high pitched noise. After escaping the facility of her captivity, Silky wandered the streets scavenging for food and eventually getting kidnapped and sold into slavery. Years go by being a slave until she is bought out by a humble farmer and his dog. Being instructed to call him Master, he showed her sympathy and raised her to be more of a daughter figure than a slave. A few months after Silky's 19th birthday, a group of soldiers and adventurers came to the farm and took her master away, leaving her in charge of the farm. She waited and waited, even far beyond after harvest season. Her master never returned. Worried about his well-being, she borrowed some leather armor and his sword that was mounted above the mantle and set out as a wanderer to learn more about this world that she lived in, with the ultimate goal of reuniting with her master.
What a strange group of people. Under normal circumstances, given their backgrounds, oh, they would never meet, ever. But call it fate or call it destiny, there's gonna be a point in time where they're all going to meet each other and brave the long and dark history and the secrets of this region. How that's gonna happen? Hell, not even I know the answer to that. I just go with the flow, and I'm just here to tell the story. And I hope you'll come to listen as we begin our adventure in the region of Luavara, starting this Thursday, October 12th at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, over on Twitch or right here on YouTube. I hope to see you all there and join me for this long story.